when we talk about visibility, what was your critical focus and your purpose for, for focusing so much on visibility?
So visibility, one of the problems is the learners can't see what's going on. The assessors keep telling the sponsor that things are happening. The admin can't see the assessments taking place. Things get lost in the post. So when we're talking about visibility, when we're looking at this, we're looking at what's going on in terms of how much time is spent on building Excel spreadsheets, on building information sheets, on building slides, on building reports, on Zoom calls, on how much time has been, so just so we can see what's going on. Yeah. So we've had clients who have, a couple of assessors, and then, the assessments take place, and the assessments take place on paper, but not digitally, and then we can't find the assessments. And it's not that you can't find them, the assessment is taking place. It's just not visible to the person who needs the visibility at the time. So you get 6 months in, the learner hasn't seen the results of the assessment, the admin hasn't seen that the assessment's taken place. So this is visibility. It's what we're talking about with regards to this thing called visibility. So when we research visibility, we're going, what is it that you can see? And so if you look at this, for example, just tracking the assessment schedules. So is the assessor assessing on time? Are they finding the learner? It's exactly what Rob and Susanna were taking. They were, after 2 hours, they'd write at the assessment space and the person's forgotten their file, as an example. So just that is costing the business 5 hours of time per learner per year. Now you do 20 learners or 100 learners, that's 1,000 hours of time just because the learner forgot their file, or because the administrator forgot their, the Excel, or computer crashed, or something happened. With the assessor in the process, they're spending 10 hours per learner just making things visible. So that's after assessment, that's over and above. And that's what training, when we speak to the SDPs and we go, what's it costing you? They go, well, we pay our assessor. Yeah, but you don't understand how much time the assessor is spending in the background, and that's per learner. And then you get the learners being informed on how well they're doing, and that's generally 3 months after assessment in a classroom at the end of the day to catch up again and do their portfolios. And the problem that we're starting to see is that the learners are not competent. The assessor is sitting in the classroom with them saying, fill that in, write this answer there, write that answer there, write this answer there, write that answer there. Well done, you're competent. So this lack of visibility, if you look on the left-hand side, you're looking at about 14 and a half hours per learner of time is spent just on visibility. And that is a cost of 3,800 rand, according to what the research is showing us. And that's what we experienced there, Judy.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that visibility, particularly in a highly regulated environment where one's accreditation status is dependent on compliance in this assessment process, is your business risk is equally as high as your cost. So on that note, maybe Jen and Robin from the South African context, you can weigh in here, and then we'll invite our international guests.
Yeah. We do have quite a significant challenge with visibility, and it is something that I have 2 clients that I am assisting. One is because they're using a digital system closely, they're on top of the projects, they know exactly where the assessments stand, and as soon as a learner hasn't submitted something, or there is an error, then basically they're able to reach out to that learner, because the learner is getting the emails, that communication is going. Because of that, the quality of the pass rate, the quality of the work, and therefore the ability to go through the verification and issue the qualifications at the end of it is significantly stronger. This client's getting like an 80% pass rate. On another side, I have another client who has it is a bigger project, but because of the individuals involved who are not tracking the project, tracking the assessors doing the work, that the evidence was being loaded, we actually have like an 80%, almost 60% drop off of evidence being submitted and loaded. We've got 20% of the learners actually loading information. Now we're at the end of the project, we're having to exit the learners, and the client now has a risk because they are applying for skills funds. They can't prove the assessments have taken place. They can prove the training, they can't prove the assessments have taken place. So now we're having to put more money into the project and spend more time with the learners in order to catch up to help them get through the process. So that is all down to visibility and tracking. So that's not only has the rand and cents cost, but then also those extra hours that individuals are having to spend and the stress, because it is a multi-million rand project. And if they're unable to prove that this has happened, all the money that the client has invested in the project is potentially blown because they're not going to get the money to offset their expenditure. So it's something that actually has become more and more important as we've gone down the track. And it's a case of these systems, they actually make your life so much easier because you can actually track who is a productive assessor. You can even check the quality of the wording, the quality of the assessment, which you can't really do until you run a moderation. So it's those sort of things, that those spin-offs that aren't reflected in these numbers, because there's a lot more than what we're showing on this spreadsheet.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thanks.
I see Rob has a time pressure. So Rob, would you like to weigh in on this for us quickly before you need to leave our session?
I can do. Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
Just in terms of your view on the importance of assessment visibility.
I would, yeah, definitely sing from the same sheet as Jennifer there. You know, the fact that you can see progress instead of having a pile of paper in the workplace is a significant benefit. I had, in fact, we've got a number of clients that when we first went to see them, before they signed up, you could see piles of paper in their office that were literally, you know, feet high, and they'd have cupboards full of paper that needed to be processed. And this is stuff they've received back from the learner. And if it takes someone 2 weeks to work through that pile of paper, it's 2 weeks till you realize there's a signature missing and you have to go halfway across the country to get it reworked and fixed up, or there's a date field that hasn't been filled in, or, you know, there's a question missing on an assessment or a checkbox that hasn't been filled in. So, you know, one client on the extreme end of the scale would be an interstate operation that has a regional head office in each state that receives the paperwork, and then they were posting it again to the head office in Sydney, who would process the paper state by state, different funding contracts, different processes for each, and just to have complete transparency and visibility across all of their work before it's even submitted, and the submission instantly arrives. You know, even simple things like, you know, signatures or dates can be mandated as required fields, so they can't be submitted and have data missing or fields incorrect or things not populated correctly. And the fact that you can see progress, and you know, it's not a surprise that when it's due and you're phoning up, they say they haven't started, or they haven't even opened it. You know, I'm sure that the other systems are similar. But every record that we have in Cloud Assess has got a timeline, so you can see every interaction a learner's had with it through their entire life of that record, whether they've opened it, saved it, you know, updated it, you know, submitted an attempt or whatever it might be. So just access to that, and the ability to engage before engagement drops off, and the ability to kind of error-proof quality and you know, see exactly what's going on. You know, it's just another tier of value, and you know, testament to, I guess, progress into a digital world.
Would any of the other panel members like to make further contributions or comments around the importance of visibility and your findings?
Yes, if that's okay, I'd like to jump in.
Thanks,
so yeah, I mean, this for me right at the beginning was one of the major reasons why I came up with the idea for OneFile. So I talked earlier about being the assessor and going out to the nursing homes. After a couple of years, I was promoted to a national contracts manager. So I then became responsible for 1,000 apprentices based all over the country. And then I was managing the assessors themselves. And, you know, very quickly I realized that I didn't have visibility of them and their workloads. And my manager once a month would ring me up and say, Susanna, how are those 1,000 apprentices doing? Are we going to get the full funding for them? And I'd be like, well, I've got no idea. So I'd start picking up the phone with an Excel spreadsheet. I had 20 assessors based all over the UK, and I'd have to have maybe an hour, a 2-hour conversation with them, going through every student. So I'd say, how's Judy doing? Oh, she's doing really well. She's about halfway through. How's Jennifer doing? Oh, not so good. They're only just getting going. I can't put just getting going onto a spreadsheet for my manager. What does that actually mean? And it was just a nightmare trying to get an objective, real-time report on the progress of the students. So again, this is when the idea for OneFile, thinking, if it could be on it wasn't called the cloud then, it was just the internet. If I could have this thing on the internet and we could tick off the competencies as we went along, if it had to be met 3 times, if somebody's met it once, it's 33%, it's not rocket science. And also because it could be time bound. So the funding could be, you've got 18 months to get somebody through this program. And after that, your funding runs out and it's now costing you as a provider to deliver the training. So it might be great. Judy's nearly finished. She's going to finish next month, but actually she should have finished in December. So it's cost us 3 months of training extra. So we're now losing money on Judy. Now using technology, it takes a second. You can press a button and it builds up a report for you on every single student. Where are they now? So they're 93% through. Where should they be? Time bound, where they should be 73% way through. So no problems with that student. You've got somebody that's 50% way through, but they should be 98% through by now. There is a problem. We need to focus on that student much quicker. And then, using technology, then you can export that into a CSV file and then email that off to as many managers as you want to. So instead of taking days to build a subjective, out-of-date report that really meant nothing, it really did, it was so poor, it now takes a couple of minutes and it can be with anybody that it needs to be. And then that can obviously, it's in a CSV file, you can then pull that out and really drill down into that data and build what you need. And then also, because you had that real-time accurate data, you were able to sort of identify where the problems were. So is the problem with a specific student? Are they falling behind and they need extra support? Is it with the assessor? So is there one assessor, but all of their students are behind? But so therefore, is it the assessor we've got a problem with? Or is it maybe an employer? Maybe the managers aren't giving their employees, their team, time off the floor to do their learning. So, if you can see a report and all the other employers are doing really, really well, but there's one employer in one placement and all of their students are falling behind, then it's a chat with the employer. And you're very easily then able to drill down and see where the issue is. I mean, I had an issue when it was on paper. And I was managing, I just had to take everybody's word for it, short of sampling and ringing up and saying, how are things getting on? And looking back, that is something I should have done as a manager. I had a phone call after 4 months from a student to say, I haven't seen my assessor for 4 months. And I was like, oh my goodness, and then when I drilled down to it, she's been sat at home and not gone out and done any work for 4 months. But when I'd spoken to her, because it was a word of mouth, she was able to tell me, oh yes, so-and-so's doing really well. Oh, I'm struggling a little bit with this student, but it was all lip service. She hadn't actually done any work for 4 months and yet she was being paid for the milestones. So, I would have easily within a couple of weeks been able to pick up on that the work wasn't being put into the portfolio. So therefore, there's something happening here. I mean, we talked about as well, obviously the visibility for the student, the tutor, and obviously the employer. But for us in England, we've got to do audits. So we have audits from external bodies that can come in as well. And I remember once we have Ofsted that look at quality, and we have the ESFA that come in to look at the funding, the money side of it. And I can remember once sat waiting with an Ofsted inspector, because a few days before they tell you which portfolios they want to look at. And then at the time, because they're all on paper, I had to arrange for couriers to go to all the employers to get the learners' portfolios off them and courier them to the head office. I paid for guaranteed delivery by 9 a.m. 1 p.m. after lunch, I was still sat there with no portfolios. The courier hadn't brought them in. And I was sat there with the inspector with nothing to inspect. It was an absolute nightmare. But again, now the auditors don't even leave to their house. You can just give them a login and they can look at the portfolios they want to look at, which is absolutely fabulous. So, you know, the cost and the time and the reputational damage that could have had on our organisation was huge if they'd have given us a bad inspection grading based on the fact that they couldn't see any of the paper portfolios until 1 p.m. We've had feedback from our customers. Again, we talked about the feedback, the impact on the learners. 32% increase in engagement by using technology to do their courses based on paper, which is absolutely phenomenal. So again, you know, we talked about earlier about if the learner's engaged, they're more likely to do the work, they're more likely to complete. And then that also obviously impacts social mobility, because a lot of these courses and programs are impacted on promotion and pay rises. So, you know, when you finish this program, you can get a pay rise of so much per hour, or you can get a promotion. And one of the biggest things, you know, when we first built OneFile, it was for me all about the savings, the cost savings, the time savings, the efficiencies, the productivity, the visibility, etc. But a few years ago, my son was really poorly, and he spent a couple of weeks in the local Manchester Children's Hospital, and I had to go for an outpatient's appointment a few months later, and I was wearing my OneFile lanyard. Is that what you guys call it? Where I put my keys on. Yeah. And I had my OneFile one on, and the assistant that did the triage at the beginning said, "Oh, do you work for OneFile?" So I didn't say, "Oh yeah, I owned it, I found it." I said, "Oh yeah, I work for OneFile." And she said, "Oh my goodness, can I just tell you?" She said, "I did a level 2 on paper and I absolutely hated it. And I swore I would never learn again. I would never do a course again. And then they asked me to do my level 3 and I told them I wouldn't, but they said, 'Oh, we're using this new system called OneFile. It's really good on the internet. It's a lot easier. Why don't you give it a go?' And she said, 'I absolutely loved it. I've done a level 4 and I've just been accepted at university to do a social work degree.' And that, I thought, that's when I realized my why. This is why I'm doing it. It's not just about the money savings. Obviously, that's amazing for the organizations, but it's the end learners' lives that we are really impacting by giving them the opportunity to learn in a different way."
So much, Susanna. I'm getting my time cue, so that was a really awesome story to end off on that on that. And I think, yeah, the learner should be at the center of this world. So let's move on. Thank you for sharing that.